Hey everybody, tonight's video is called Chambers for the Priests, and tonight we continue our pass-through study here in the book of Ezekiel, where we're going to be looking at the chambers for the priest and the outer dimensions of this new temple. So we are going to be in chapter 42, and this is actually going to be a pretty quick move-in video. It's probably going to be maybe 10-15 minutes. So Ezekiel chapter 42, we're going to tackle a large chunk of it, 1 through 9. Says, "Then he brought me out in the outer court by the way toward the north, and he brought me into the chamber which was opposite the separating courtyard, and which was opposite the building toward the north, facing the length, which was 100 cubits, the width of 50 cubits, was the north door. Opposite the inner court of 20 cubits, and opposite the pavement of the outer court was gallery against gallery in 3 stories. And in front of the chambers toward the inside was a walk 10 cubits wide at a distance of 1 cubit, and their doors faced north. Now the upper chambers were shorter because the galleries took away space from them more than from the lower and middle stories of the building. For they were in 3 stories and did not have pillars like the pillars of the courts. Therefore the upper level was shortened more than the lower and middle levels from the ground up. And a wall which was outside ran parallel to the chambers at the front of the chambers toward the outer court. Its length was 50 cubits. The length of the chambers toward the outer court was 50 cubits, whereas that facing the temple was 100 cubits. At the lower chambers was the entrance on the east side, as one goes into them from the outer court." So Ezekiel's guide took him away from the temple building back to the outer court, and there they noted the gallery against gallery in 3 stories, and these held chambers or rooms, and the priestly rooms were described between verses 3 through 12, situated along the south, north, and west walls of the sanctuary and the most holy place in 3 stories. And the priests, they eat the holy offerings as seen in Leviticus chapter 2 verse 3 through 10, Leviticus chapter 6 verse 9 through 11, and Leviticus chapter 10 verse 12, and dress there. And we see a remarkable description of detail here that's appropriate for a real material temple. In verse 10 through 12 says, "Also, there were chambers in the thickness of the wall of the court toward the east, opposite the separating courtyard and opposite the building. There was a walk in front of them also, and their appearance was like the chambers which were toward the north. They were as long and as wide as the others, and all their exits and entrances were according to plan. And corresponding to the door of chambers that were facing south as one enters them, there was a door in front of the walk, the way directly in front of the wall toward the east." So many of the walls in these structures are rather thick, and it made sense to make rooms or chambers in the walls themselves. And nothing about the structure was random. All of it was according to plan. Verse 13-14, "Then he said to me, the north chambers and the south chambers, which were opposite the separating courtyard, are the holy chambers where the priests who approach the Lord shall eat the most holy offerings. There they shall lay the most holy offerings, the grain offering, sin offering, and trespass offering, for the place is holy. When the priests enter them, they shall not go out of the holy chamber into the outer court, but there they shall leave their garments in which they minister, for they are holy. They shall put on other garments, then they may approach that which is for the people." So many of the sacrifices included a sacrificial or ceremonial meal shared by the priests, and sometimes those bringing the offering, provision was made for a place to eat the most holy offerings. And this was a meal of fellowship between God and man. And the priests had the right to eat of certain offerings. And when grain and animals were brought for sacrifice, they could be stored in these chambers. And the storage chambers were also for the holy clothing that was worn by the priests as they served. And when their duties were complete, they were to put on other garments to go out amongst the people. In verse 15 through 20, to finish the chapter, says, "Now when he had finished measuring the inner temple, he brought me out through the gateway that faces toward the east and measured it all around. He measured the east side with the measuring rod, 500 rods by the measuring rod all around. He measured the north side, 500 rods by the measuring rod all around. He measured the south side, 500 rods by the measuring rod. He came around to the west side and measured 500 rods by the measuring rod. He measured it on the four sides. It had a wall all around, 500 cubits long and 500 wide, to separate the holy areas from the common. So the angel measured the height and thickness of the outside wall, then the outer court, next the inner court with chambers, and finally the extent of all the temple buildings outside. In measuring of the other wall, 500 rods each way were approximately 1 mile on all four sides, and much too large for Mount Moriah. This scheme will require changes in the topography of Jerusalem, as Zechariah predict. And also Ezekiel 14, verse 9 through 11. So to wrap up today's study, we look at the rooms for the priests, starting with the upper and lower chambers. And verse 10 through 12 shows access to the chambers. Verse 13-14 shows the holy chambers to the north and south. And we saw how priests had rights to eat of certain offerings. And let's go over to 1 Corinthians 9, verse 13-14. First Corinthians 9, 13-14, "Do you not know that those who minister the holy things eat of the things of the temple, and those who serve at the altar partake in the offerings of the altar? Even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. So likewise, those who preach the gospel should live of the gospel," meaning we should be taking care in the church aspect of things. We should be taking care of our church leaders and their needs. Ezekiel 42, verse 15 through 19, showed the measure on each side's outer dimensions of the new temple. And the chapter ended with the purpose of the wall. And we see the purpose of the wall around the temple compound was to communicate the principle of God's holiness as separated from that which was common. And as I promised, about 10 minutes, we will see you next tomorrow, Lord willing, as we'll look at God's glory come to Ezekiel's temple. And that video will be a longer study. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I hope that you have a great weekend. If you don't catch tomorrow's video, if you celebrate Resurrection Weekend, I hope that you have a great time. God bless.